Morning, 5th grade, or good afternoon. This is these are pages 8 and 9, and the big ideas, at least on 8, that we're going to look at first. This is comparing, and the big idea is place value. And we said that in several of the videos. I mean, some of these big ideas just over and over and over again are so important. So this is place value, and when you go to compare something, so we're going to just look at something here really fast. Here you've got the first one. You got 2 hundredths and comparing that to 2 thousandths. So just real quick, let's go look, and I have a place value chart, and I suggest that you make one too, like we did before. See if this will work. Okay, so here is a place value chart. Let me move myself over here a little bit. So here's a place value chart, and here's what you want to be thinking of when you are comparing things. Let's just take a number like 1. Oh, so we've been having some trouble with that here. Hold on, we'll try again. See if it'll let me do that. Okay, 1 and 9 tenths, 9 hundredths, 9 thousandths, or 1 and 999 thousandths. So when you look at that number, if I write it down here, you know, it looks intimidating because it's got a lot of 9, so it looks super huge. So what if we were to compare that to the number 2, for example? So here's where you got to just, it's a little tricky. You have 1 and, here, I'll try to clean that up a little bit. Let's try it again. So 1 and 999,000. It has a lot of digits. So you might say, well, it's got more digits. You know, it's got more digits, so it's definitely going to be worth more than this number. Or you might say, well, look at all those 9s, you know, and so those are bigger than 2. But here's what you want to think about. Think about place value. So let's take a look at this number. What place value is the 1 in? So if this were to stand for pizza, for example, okay? What place value is the 1 in? The 1 is in the 1's place. So that stands for 1 whole pizza. This 9 is in the 10ths place. It stands for 9 tenths of a pizza, not a whole pizza. This stands for parts, 9 tenths, and pretty big parts. Okay, a tenth is not too bad. If we were to draw real quickly here, we've got some tenths. We could draw 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, cut this in half, and a tenth of a pizza, 9 of them, you know, so that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's a lot of pizza, but it's not a whole pizza. It's not a whole pizza. And then this 9 is in the hundredths place. So it means taking a pizza, cutting it into 100 slices, which would be really hard. I have to cut like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Got to go 9 this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's really hard. And then just getting just 9 of them. Okay, not even a whole tenth. Just 9 parts. So we're talking not all, just parts. And then of course when you go to thousandths, remember the parts are getting smaller. So if you compare 1 and 999 thousandths to 2, 2 is going to be larger because it stands for 2 whole pizzas. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. As we compare over here, when we start to get to the right of the decimal point, these are parts. And the parts get smaller. Okay, let's keep that in mind. That's our place value strategy there. All right, let's go get, I think it was 2 tenths. 2 hundredths and 2 thousandths. Here, we'll go take a look at it real fast here. Just a second. Going to compare 2 hundredths and 2 thousandths. Yeah. So if you put it on a place value chart, then it's really easy. So we have 2 hundredths, and then we have 2 thousandths. So if this is pizza, we have less than we don't have a whole pizza. We don't even have a tenth. But this pizza up here is 2 hundredths. And these pieces are bigger than thousandths. And that's where we stop. So we say this has 2 hundredths, this has no hundredths. Right away, this is larger. You don't need to go any further. In fact, we could put a 0 here since there is nothing there. And sometimes that's really helpful also. But the fact is, really think about that. This is 2 hundredths. This is no hundredths. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that was a 9 there, okay? If this was a 9, don't let that trick you, because that still means 9 teeny tiny parts. Stop right here. We've got 2 way bigger parts. This one doesn't even have a hundredth, okay? Not even 100th. All right, so let's put it back. Keep that in mind. So place value, place value. Okay, 200's easily bigger than 2,000. So let's go back and record that. Okay, and then how do we do this? Well, you're always going to point to that smaller number. Point to the smaller number, because this, when you read it across, it will say 200ths is greater than, that's the open side, then greater than 2,000ths. Okay, so you always point to the smaller number. So the strategies you can use for each one of these is you could go through, put each one on a place value chart. Here's 500ths and 5/10ths. Okay, we could go do the same thing, 500ths and 5/10ths. Okay. First one is 500ths, and then you have 5/10ths. Okay, comparing these numbers, they are if it's pizza, neither one has a whole pizza. This one has 5/10ths, 5/10ths, tenths, and this has no slices that are the size of a tenth. It does have 5 slices that are 100th, but remember those were teeny tiny when we drew those. So 5/10ths, this is where you stop comparing because it has nothing. This one has no tenths. 5/10ths is greater. Okay, let's go and take a look at that. All right, so here's our 5/10ths. We're always going to point to the smaller number, okay? Point to the smaller number because it's going to be read. In this case, we read from left to right. We would say 500ths, and so you got the smaller end of it, right? Pointing to the smaller number. 500ths is less than 5/10ths. 500ths less than 5/10ths. Okay, let's just do a couple more, and then I might skip around a little bit, and then I'll turn it off. I'll fill it in, let you check your work. Okay, you can fill them all in and check your work. Let's see here. Let's find one that's might be kind of tricky. Let's see. Oh, look here at number 4. Okay, so let's look at this one. This is 7400ths and 84,000ths. All right, so let's go look at that one. 7400ths and 84,000ths. That could be potentially tricky. Again, if you put it on a place value chart, it won't be. It's super easy. So we had 7400ths, and then we had 84,000ths. Okay, 7400ths and 84,000ths. And if you go in a place value chart, so let's look at it. There's 2 ways to look at this. 2 ways. So again, with math, you can be really creative. So first of all, this number has 7/10ths of a pizza. 3 more slices, and you have a whole pizza. Remember, for every 10 here, I get to go to the next column over, the next place value. That's how our place value system works. And here, the same thing. All right, so here, if I need 7/10ths, this has no tenths. This is the bigger number right here. This is the bigger number. Even though this one has 800ths, you might say, well, it's got 800ths, and that only has 4. But that's where you have to stop and remind yourself. It doesn't matter because we're just looking to see where, look at the biggest pieces. This one, because it has 7/10ths, okay, it doesn't matter if this one has 800ths, okay? And again, if we were to draw that, remember that 7/10ths would look something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it would have 7 of those colored in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whereas the hundredths, remember, we had even trouble drawing that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can't draw that way very well. And we're talking 8 of those colored in. It would be really hard to do. I'm not sure I can even do it, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. Okay, teeny tiny pieces. There's 8. There's the 800ths. Doesn't even come close to the 7/10ths. Okay. All right. The other thing you can do is on a place value chart, you could just you can put the numbers, put a 0 because I have no thousands. So now you can actually just sort of look at this whole number and you can say 740 thousandths. Okay. Thousandths. Whoops. I just noticed something here. That should say, that must have gotten erased when I copied it over from another file. Thousandths. Hundredths. Dreads. Gotta have the TH. Okay, got the TH going. Okay, so I put a 0 in there. Now it's 740 thousandths compared to 84,000. So there's another way you could look at that. Okay, always cool ways to do that. All right, so that's our larger number. Let's go take a look. So, okay, 74 hundredths is the larger number. We're going to point. Oops, sorry, I'm on number 4. I'm going to point to the smaller number. All right, pointing to the smaller number, we're going to read this 74 hundredths is greater than 84 thousandths. Okay? So put the rest of those on a place value chart and give that a try. I'm trying to see if there's any other kind of tricky ones here. I thought I saw one. There was one more I wanted to do. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, number 6. Number 6. Okay, this is kind of an interesting one. So let's take a look at number 6 really fast. This is 5 and 130 thousandths, or 5 and 13 hundredths. All right, let's go look at that. Hold on. Let me look at it. 5 and 130 thousandths, 13 hundredths. Okay. Let's get that one on here. Just a second. 5 and 130 thousandths, or 5 and 13 hundredths. Okay? So let's take a look at this. They have the same number of ones, so it's 5 whole pizzas. What about tenths? What about tenths? So it's clearly, this is the same number of pizzas. What about tenths? This one has 1/10 and 1/10. Even, Steven, so far. How about this one? 3 hundredths and 3 hundredths. And now, for the confusing part, this one has 0 thousandths. And this one has, you guessed it, 0 thousandths. So it doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. In fact, most of the time in math, when we are writing, if we don't need a 0, when we're looking at decimals to the right of the decimal place, if we don't need that 0, we typically don't even include it. So they were just trying to trick you with that one, because you really don't need it. It doesn't add any value to it. Okay? So I take the 0 off. It's still 5 holes, 1/10, 3 hundredths. If I were to take the 0 off there, it's still 5 whole, 1/10, 3 hundredths. So it doesn't really matter. They're just testing, you know, your thinking on that. So these are equal. Okay, we'll go back. Get those guys equal. Let's see, where are they? Right here. So that's equal. Okay, I'm going to pause this. You go through, finish the rest of them, and then you can check your work with mine. Okay, pause it and finish the rest. Okay, here we go. Let's go through. We're going to do these kind of quickly. We're going to compare holes. 3 holes. 3 whole pizzas. 3 whole pizzas. 2 tenths. 2 tenths. 0 tenths. There's our small one. 3 and 201 thousandths is greater than 3 and 99 thousandths. All right, let's come over here. Here we have 0 holes, 1 hole. Bam, we're done. This one's way bigger. Point to the small one. We read this as 159 thousandths is less than 1 and 590 thousandths. Again, I'm not sure why they're including the 0, because technically you really don't need it. All right, here we go. 8 whole pizzas. 8 whole pizzas. It's a tie. 2 tenths. 2 tenths. Ooh, 2 tenths. It's a tie. 6 hundredths. 6 hundredths. This one has 9 thousandths. So even though they're small, this one beats out this number by a teeny tiny itty bitty thousandths. So this is our small number. We're pointing that small end to the small number. 8 and 269 thousandths is greater than 8 and 268 thousandths. Okay? Here we go. 4 whole pizzas. 4 whole pizzas. 6 tenths. No tenths. Bam. That one's smaller. This time we could actually just look at 302 whole pizzas versus only a measly 300 pizzas. And so, bam, that one's smaller. We would read this as 302 and. It's the only time you say and is when you have that little decimal there. 302, not 302 and, just 302 and 26 thousandths is greater than 300 and 226 thousandths. All right, here we got 2 tenths, 2 tenths, 3 hundredths. Bam, this one's bigger. Only 2 hundredths. 3 whole pizzas, 3 whole pizzas. No tenths, 3 tenths. Stop. That one is smaller. 9 whole pizzas, 9 whole pizzas. 0 tenths, 4. Stop right there. Okay, that one is smaller. 6 whole pizzas versus 6 pizzas. 1 tenth versus 1 tenth. 2 tenths versus 9 tenths. Bam. Now this is an interesting one, because here's what they're trying to show you. You might look at this and say, well, look at all those digits. I got a lot of digits there. So be really careful. Be really careful. 606 and 129 thousandths versus 6 and 19 hundredths. Let's go look at that one. 6 and 129 thousandths. Let's take a look at that one. 6 and 129 thousandths. Okay, hold on. Good one to put on the place value chart here. 6 and 129 thousandths versus 6 and 19 hundredths, I think. Let me look at it one more time. Make sure, yeah. Okay, so you know, this is a good one to look at because 6-hole pizzas, the tenths are the same. This time, this has only 2 hundredths. This has 9 hundredths. But you might be tempted to say, ooh, it's got 9 thousandths. Wonder what's going on with that. But remember, those are tiny slices. This one has 2 hundredths. This has more of the larger slices, hundredths, okay? So it doesn't matter that that has more thousandths, okay? All right, so let's go. We got that one, right? Okay. So basically the same thing is going on here. I am just going to go through and answer all those, and then you can check your work. Okay. Okay, so just take a look at what we've got. You know, just if you checked each place value, you would have done just fine. Here's a tricky one. Check this one out here. Here's what they've got. Look at this. All a bunch of digits here, and just 5 and 4 tenths. But look, 4 tenths is more than 3 tenths, so it doesn't matter. Even though it has digits in these smaller place values, they mean nothing. They're teeny. They're tiny pieces of pizza. And this one, this just a rotten trick here they did on us because they put 12 and ones and twos. Look, ones and twos. So you have to really be careful. So 12-hole pizzas, 12-hole pizzas. Maybe I made a mistake, right? 1/10, 1/10. Nope, 100th and 200th. So this one is the smaller one. And here's one we talked about. Even though we don't even need these zeros, remember we can take them off, and those are the same. What strategies did you use? Please take time to reflect. Take time to reflect here, and you will connect that learning. So when you write this, you might say something like, well, I used a place value chart. I drew a place value chart and put the numbers on. Or I imagined a place value chart and I compared the place values. Or you could actually like write. I wrote the numbers vertically like this, okay, and then I compared them. This is kind of like doing work with a place value chart. You're just like, you know, same, smaller. There's my smaller one. Okay. So please take time to do that. That reflecting is really important. Okay, let's go look at page 9. Okay, we're going to do some rounding on this. And so I'll just do a couple of these. We're going to round, first of all, round to the nearest tenth, and then down here we'll round to the nearest hundredth. I'll do a couple of them on a number line, a vertical number line. That's how you started in 4th grade. And the same thing in 5th grade. So a couple of, wait, this is 5th grade, sorry. Okay. I'm doing different videos, so I got a little confused. So we'll do some on the number line. Then we can talk about, you know, picturing in your head the place value in the number line. And then there's a trick you can use to speed that up. But let's do it with the number line first. So round each one to the nearest tenth. So this is 32 hundredths. So let's go to the place value chart first. Okay, place value chart. Oops, wrong way. Okay. 32 hundredths. 32 hundredths, I think, is what it was. Okay. 32 hundredths. Okay, rounding to the nearest tenth means the whole purpose of rounding is to make numbers shorten them, make them easier to work with. So this is only the tenths place. Whoop, let's go back. Hold on just a second. So only the tenths place is the one that we're interested in. In other words, the hundredths place will just have anything beyond or to the right will just have a 0. I'm going to make this easier to work with. So easy thing to do is just come down here and say, well, I'm only interested in the value up to the tenths place, so it's just 3 tenths, or I could make it 30 hundredths. Okay, so now let's go back. This is, in fact, part of our where we start with our number line. So if you use a place value chart, it'll show you, oh, this is our first end point. So let's go look at that. Okay, so here we have a number line, and rounding. All rounding means is which end point is it closest to. That's all it is. Which end point? Whoops. Which end point is it closest to? Okay, so let's take a look at that. We said the first end point was 30 hundredths. Okay. Now we could just put 3 tenths, but it's going to help us with decimals. It's going to help us to put 30 hundredths. I'll show you why in just a second. So this is 33 tenths or 30 hundredths, which means we would have to jump up. So plus 1/10. So this would be 40. 4 tenths or 40 hundredths. And then here's why it's helpful. If we go ahead, if I just had written, I'll show you. If I just had written 3 tenths and 4 hundredths, you'd have to sort of make this, you have to think this through, because your end point would not be, most of you are going to say, oh, it's got to be a 5 in there because that's halfway, but your end point would not be, 0.5. You have to kind of think through, well, what's going on here? Well, what's going on is when I count from 3 tenths up to 4 tenths, I'm going to be counting by something smaller than tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have to go over to the next place value. This would actually be 31 hundredths, 32 hundredths, 33 hundredths. That would be 34 hundredths. And this one in the middle would be 35 hundredths. And that makes sense. I'm going from 1/10 on a number line to another. So these are going to be small, a smaller unit of measurement to do that. So sometimes it's easier just to leave this, okay? All right, so let's go back to our number. Our number is, that we are rounding, is 32. So where does that go on the number line? Well, you can see right away, it's here. It's less than the midpoint. So when we round it to the nearest tenth, it's going to be, and we wouldn't write 30 hundredths, although you probably would get credit if you did that. We're going to stay with tenths, and we're going to write 3 tenths. Okay? Actually, to be mathematically correct, hold on a second. I would say 32 hundredths is approximately 3 tenths. Okay, so let's go fix that one. Okay, so just to save some recording time, number 2 is 3 87 hundredths. So I just wrote it on my place value chart, rounded to the nearest tenth. So again, I'm only interested in the place values up to the tenths place. The whole purpose of rounding is to make numbers easier to work with. I want to get rid of some of these smaller digits over here. So I just want to round this. Instead of 3 87 hundredths, I'm trying to figure out, well, which tenth is it closest to? So this becomes my first endpoint, 3 8 tenths. Now remember, I told you that you might want to go ahead and just, because this has a place in the hundredths place, if you put a 0 there for decimals, it's going to make it a little bit easier. Here's our first endpoint. So let's go and let's round this number to the nearest tenth. Okay, so our number that we're rounding is 3 87 hundredths. We said our first endpoint, we're only interested in the digits up to the tenths place, and we said we were going to, however, include a 0 in the hundredths place, because that's going to help us. So our first endpoint is 3 80 hundredths. All right, so that means we're going from here to here. We're going to go up by a tenth. This is our big jump. Remember, this is just the halfway point. This is the next tenth. So the next tenth would be 3 9 tenths, but we're going to include that 0. Doesn't change anything. 3 90 hundredths. We talked about earlier that 0 adds no value. And in your final answer, you wouldn't need it, but for now, it's helpful. We can leave it there. This helps you to find the midpoint. 3 80 hundredths, 3 90 hundredths. So it helps you to find 3 85. And you're probably starting to get the idea now. You're like, oh, so if the midpoint's 83 85 hundredths, here's the number I'm rounding. So which one is it going to be closest to? Definitely going to be up here. Okay. So 3 87 hundredths is about, and we want the nearest tenth. So this time 3 9 tenths. That's how we're going to record our final answer. I know we have 90 on our number line, but that's just to help us. Okay. If you were to record this on a test, I think you would still get credit because technically you have rounded it, because that is not adding any value. But because they say tenths, just take it off. And that way there's no confusion. Okay? All right, good job. Let's go get another one. Okay, let's get this big bad boy right here, okay? Because it looks like it's going to be really difficult. But it's not, okay? It's just not. It's like saying I have 645 59 thousandths is 645 minutes and 59 thousandths is how long it took me to, we'll say, run a certain race. But I don't really need to go out to the hundredths and thousandths. I just want this time rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay, so 645 and 59 thousandths. So let's go put that on our place value. Okay, let's put 600. Whoops. Let's see if we get it right. 645 and 59 thousandths. Okay, I'm going to make sure I got that right. Okay, remember we talked about this is like, maybe this is time, 645 minutes and 59 thousandths, but we want to compare times, but we just want to compare it up to the nearest tenth. So we're only interested in the digits up to the tenths place. So in this case, our tenths place are 645 and 0 tenths and 0 tenths, okay? So let's go and take a look at this. Put this on our number line here. Okay, so here we are, 645 and 59 thousandths. We're only interested in rounding to the nearest tenth. There's our tenths place. We only want to go this far. So technically we could write on our number line 645 and 0 tenths. Let's start with that, okay? Because that's what we have. We're talking about the next tenth, so we add, this means plus 1 tenth. So 645 and 0 tenths. Our next big jump would be 645 and 1 tenth, okay? But again, it might be helpful to have another decimal place so that we can figure out what's halfway between 0 tenths and 1 tenth. Remember, you're going to have to remind yourself, oh, I got to go halfway between there would be hundredths. I got to go to the hundredths place. So just put a hundredths place here for now and watch how easy that works. So here we have 645 and no hundredths, 645 and 10 hundredths. So the midpoint would be 645 and 5 hundredths. Okay? And now this is a pretty interesting little number because it looks like 645, it matches up all the way to the 5 hundredths. This one just has 9 more thousandths. So this number actually is just a little, a squeaky, teeny tiny bit greater than the midpoint, just a little bit higher. But remember, we only need for that number to be either, even if that number was exactly equal, by the way, to 645 and 5 hundredths, you would round up, okay? Why do that? Because that's what mathematicians and people have generally agreed to do. That way they won't get all confused and have, even though it's in the middle and technically it's about the same distance to the bottom, or it is technically the same distance to the bottom as it is to the other endpoint, to both endpoints, to make it so that everybody agrees on it, most people will agree we just round up. We round up, okay. But in this case, this number is a little bit bigger, so it actually is closer to this. So our final answer, remember they asked us for tenths. It's 645 and 1 tenth is what you would do for your final answer. All right, let's go record that. Okay, so let's talk about another strategy. I really recommend that you use a vertical number line until you get that in your head. That's the whole purpose for them having you use a number line, is that eventually you'll just use a number line in your head, which is a big idea in math. If you can visualize place value charts and a number line in your head, that's what you're going to use. So let's say we want to round this number, okay? So we could visualize in our head, we're interested in this value, the tenths place, 7 tenths. So what that means is either the number is going to round to 7 tenths or 8 tenths. Those are our two values. And then you can look at the number right next to it, and you could. That's why a lot of times they'll say circle it, okay? And so I didn't really circle it, but I'm circling the 0, teeny number, okay? There, I'm trying to circle the 0. So I can look at that number and I can say, oh, okay. So really my number is actually 7 tenths. So just rounding that number, it's gonna be closer to 7 tenths, okay? Because this is what I would actually be looking to put on, because when I put this number on the place value chart, 0.709, it's like, okay, 7 tenths, same thing. 0 hundredths, same thing. So 9 thousandths means it's a little bit higher than 7 tenths. So it's super close to 7/10, so 7/10. That's why you'll hear people say, well, just underline that and then look at the number next to it. 5 or more, round it up. 4 or less, stay on the floor. 1 through 4, stay on the floor. 5 through 9, climb the vine. But it's great to know that, but do you know why you're doing that? So please make sure you understand. Let's look at this one. This is 7/10. So my number is going to be, my endpoint will be 12 and 7/10, right? Because I'm only interested in that, or 12 and 8/10. But if I look on the number next to it, look, it's a 5. That tells me it's going to be right in the middle, right? 12 and 75/100ths. So that's why this will round up to 12 and 8/10. So as you get better with that, then that's going to help you to do all of your rounding. But for now, stay with that place value, or stay with the number line in the place value chart. Okay, so let's make sure we check this one. This is 12 and 7/10. So I have 12 and 7/10 is one of my endpoints. My next endpoint, 12 and 8/10. And I've got a 4, which means I would be putting 12. So right in the middle we know is 12 and 75/100ths. So you can see that one. That's why that 1 through 4 stay on the floor. It's going to be closer. Just want to make sure you understand that. Okay, let's do a couple of these to the hundredths. Let's do one or two of those to the hundredths, and then we'll call it. Okay, now we're rounding to the nearest hundredths place. So my number that I'm supposed to round is 1 and 79 thousandths. Okay. All right. So what's the nearest hundredth? Okay. So if you think about this number, if you have one more thousandth, if you add one more thousandth to this number, what's going to happen? It's going to become 1 and 800ths. So it looks really likely that our final answer will be 1 and 800ths. But let's put it on our number line. We're interested in only the digits up to the hundredths place. So there's our first endpoint, 1 and 700ths. Okay. Again, we're starting to think ahead here, and we're saying, once we put that on a number line, that's really that 9. It's over 5. It's going to be really close to the 8. Let's put that on our number line. Okay, so here we are. Here is our midpoint. So we are going up to the hundredths place. So 1 and 700ths. So we're going to go 1 and 700ths. But because this number has a digit over here, we're going to go ahead and remember, put that 0 there. That will help us to find the midpoint. So this is 1 and 700ths, or 70 thousandths. And we're going to add this time not a tenth, but we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So we add a hundredth, and we would get 1 and 800ths. We're going to add that 0 because it helps us to see the midpoint. It doesn't change the value of this at all. So this is now, we just read it differently. Instead of 1 and 700ths, we just say 1 and 70 thousandths, 1 and 80. So you can kind of see that their midpoint is going to be 1 and 75. And that's why, look at this number, that's why you already automatically know, okay, this number is going to be really close to here. That's where 1 and 79 thousandths is going to go. So that's why we said our final answer is, when I round it, it's going to be the 1 and 800ths. Remember, we're just temporarily using that 0 because it helps us find that midpoint. And then we're going to take it off because the question says, to the hundredths place. All right, let's look at one more. Okay, let's look at this one. Again, if you can do this one, you can do all the rest of those, okay? So 645 and 59 thousandths. Same thing we had up here, but this time rounding to the nearest hundredth. Let's go put it on our chart. Okay, here it is on the place value chart, and we are interested in the values up to the hundredths place only. There's our first endpoint, 645 and 500ths. That's going to be our first endpoint. Let's put that on our number line. Okay, here we go. We're going to put this, on our place value chart, we went up to the hundredths place only. So there's our first endpoint, 645 and 500ths. And if we add a hundredth, because we're rounding to the nearest hundredth, our other endpoint will be 645 and 600ths. Now we need the midpoint. And this is where we're going to add that 0 to help us out. Okay, so now we have 50 over here and 60. So this will help us to see, because remember, we're going between 500ths and 600ths. we're going to have to jump down to the next smallest place value, the thousandths. That's what we're actually counting in here. Okay, so that midpoint will be 645 and 55 thousandths. And again, we looked at this 9 and we're like, oh, that's really going to make this number is so close to 600ths. In fact, it is, you can tell it's right there. So it rounds to, so 645 and 59 thousandths to the nearest hundredth is going to be 645 and 6 hundredths. Remember, we're going to leave it just in the hundredths. We just use that 0 to help ourselves out. And last thing I'm going to do is just fill in the rest of them so you have them and you can check your work, and then we'll call it. Okay, so here is, I'm going to look at just to the hundredths place. There's 70 hundredths. Whoops. There's 70 hundredths. And I look at the place value next to it is a 9. That tells me on my number line that's going to be awfully close to 71 hundredths. Here is my digit in the hundredths place, is that 4, so I've got 12 and 74 hundredths. I look at that next digit over, oh man, that's really small. It's a 5. That tells me it's right in the middle, so I'm going to round it up to the next hundredth up, 12 and 75 hundredths. This one we just did, so 645 and 6 hundredths. And this one, here's my digit in the hundredths place. I look at the digit next to it. And so when I graph it on my number line, when I think about that vertical number line, this is just really going to be down here closer to my first endpoint. So it will be 50 and 50 hundredths. Okay. All right, I think that's going to do it for now. So again, we use some big ideas with place value. You can stop the tape, you can come back to it, or the recording, I should say, not the tape. You can stop it, go back to it. You don't have to listen to the whole thing, but look at some of those parts, and hope you benefit. I'm going to do some other fun videos coming up, so hopefully you'll tune back in. Goodbye for now.